A medieval king once went 6 months without a full bath. He considered it holy. A Roman street cleaner bathed every single day and paid less than the price of bread to do it. That alone should change how you think about the Middle Ages. But here is what most videos on this topic will not tell you. Rome had some of the most advanced public health infrastructure in human history, and it barely moved the needle on disease. Romans ate closer to what a modern cardiologist would prescribe than any medieval royal ever did. Their gladiators were not fed meat, they were fed barley, and when training ended, they drank ash. And yet Rome quietly poisoned itself. In its wine, in its pipes, in the stunted bones of its own children. This is not a story about who was healthier. It is about what both civilizations reveal the moment you stop reading the official version. Rome moved water the way modern cities move electricity. 11 aqueducts fed the city at its peak, not dripping pipes, but enormous volumes of fresh water flowing continuously from distant mountains into public fountains, baths, and latrines across the entire urban grid. Some reached private homes, most reached everyone else. That last part matters. Roman public baths, the thermae, were not luxury spas for senators. They were infrastructure for ordinary people. Entry cost almost nothing. A labourer could walk in off a building site, strip, scrub, steam, and scrape dead skin off with a curved metal blade called a strigil, and be back at work within the hour. Every day. This was not leisure. It was routine. No medieval city built anything remotely close. Medieval towns managed with cesspits, open drains, and garderobes, latrines built into castle walls, dropping waste into moats or rivers below. No aqueducts, no thermae, no state investment in the principle Rome had figured out 1,000 years earlier. Clean water in, dirty water out. Even that logic, it turns out, was not enough. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's famous sewer, was not built to carry human waste. It was built to drain marshland and control flooding. Most household sewage still went into cesspits, chamber pots, and the street. Paleoparasitology, the study of ancient parasites, shows no meaningful reduction in roundworm, whipworm, and dysentery organisms across Roman period sites compared with what came before or after. Vindolanda, a Roman fort on Hadrian's Wall, makes it concrete. Excavations of its latrine sediments found soldiers infected simultaneously with roundworm, whipworm, and giardia. The stone toilet had running water. The men sitting on it had chronic gut infections regardless. Rome built the infrastructure. The parasites adapted. In 1993, researchers analysed the bones of Roman gladiators excavated from a cemetery in Ephesus, modern-day Turkey. They expected to find evidence of a high-protein, meat-heavy diet. Elite fighters, peak physical condition. Surely the Roman equivalent of steak and protein shakes. What they found was barley, beans, grains, a diet almost entirely plant-based, nearly identical to the local civilian population. Gladiators even had a nickname among Romans that reflected this: hordeari, barley eaters. And the same bone chemistry analysis found elevated strontium levels consistent with them drinking a recovery tonic after training, a mixture of plant ash and vinegar, essentially a mineral supplement described in ancient texts. Rome's deadliest fighters were fueled by what a modern sports nutritionist would recognize as a high-carbohydrate, plant-forward endurance diet. Nobody told them it was supposed to work. It just did. This was not an accident of poverty. It was the Roman dietary baseline. For most Romans, the daily diet consisted of wheat bread or porridge, legumes, vegetables, olive oil, moderate wine, and occasional fish or meat. The agricultural writer Cato describes slave rations in precise detail: several kilograms of wheat per month, small amounts of olive oil, salt fish, and cheap vinegar. Monotonous, energy-dense, but low in saturated fat and heavily plant-based. Modern clinical research on Mediterranean-style diets connects exactly this pattern: whole grains, legumes, olive oil, minimal red meat, to lower rates of cardiovascular disease, lower metabolic risk, and longer lifespan. Romans ate this way not because they understood nutrition science. They ate this way because it was cheap, available, and culturally embedded across the empire. They stumbled into one of the healthiest dietary patterns in human history. Then they poured lead into the wine. Romans had a sweetener they used everywhere: in wine, in sauces, in preserved fruit. It was called sapa, or de frutum, and it was made by boiling grape must down in lead vessels until it reduced into a thick, sweet syrup. The longer it cooked, the more lead it absorbed. The more refined the product, the more toxic it became. They knew lead was dangerous. The architect Vitruvius wrote in the 1st century BC that workers exposed to lead fumes grew pale and sick. He recommended ceramic pipes over lead ones for exactly that reason. The warning was recorded. The lead vessels kept cooking. Lead turned up in Roman pipes, cookware, cosmetics, and coins. Bone and tooth analyses of Roman period skeletons show elevated lead levels across the population, with the highest concentrations in urban elites. The people who drank the most wine, ate the most luxury food, and used the most lead-glazed servingware. The toxic irony is precise. The richer the Roman, the more lead they consumed. The popular theory that lead poisoning caused the fall of Rome is almost certainly overstated. Modern historians treat it as background harm, real, cumulative, neurologically and metabolically damaging, but not a single cause. Think of it less like a poison and more like Rome's version of plastic. Everywhere, invisible, slowly doing damage no one was measuring. A skeletal study of 844 individuals from Roman and post-Roman Gaul tells the rest of the story. Roman period skeletons showed shorter femur lengths and significantly more childhood stress markers, dental enamel defects and bone lesions consistent with chronic infection and nutritional disruption, than individuals from the post-Roman period. The empire that built aqueducts was stunting its own children. Every documentary about medieval kings shows the same image: enormous tables, whole roasted animals, mountains of meat, rivers of ale, lords eating with their hands while peasants starve outside the gates. The bones tell a different story. Isotopic analysis, a technique that reads the chemical signature of what a person actually ate over years, preserved in skeletal tissue, has been applied to hundreds of medieval skeletons across England. A major Cambridge study examining elites and commoners from the 5th to the 11th century found something historians had not expected. The diet signatures of kings, nobles, and ordinary peasants were broadly similar. Mostly cereals, modest amounts of meat, dairy, and fish. The gap between the richest and the poorest, written into their bones, was far smaller than the manuscripts suggested. Those manuscripts were the problem. Medieval food lists describing royal feasts record staggering quantities, hundreds of animals, thousands of loaves, enough ale to flood a market. But these were not daily menus. They were diplomatic events, political theatre, the equivalent of a state banquet being used as evidence that a president eats that way every night. The church made it even simpler. Medieval Christians were required to fast, meaning no meat and sometimes no eggs or dairy, on roughly 1/3 of all days in the year. Fridays, Saturdays, the entirety of Lent, and dozens of saints' days. Elites substituted expensive fish, almonds, and spiced sauces. The theology was about sacrifice. The biology was accidental calorie and fat restriction for every class simultaneously. Medieval peasants, meanwhile, ate from garden plots year-round: leeks, onions, garlic, cabbage, apples, pears, legumes. Modest, seasonal, more nutritionally varied than the cliché of medieval starvation allows. The groaning banquet table was a propaganda image. The daily diet was much quieter. By the time Henry VIII could no longer walk unaided, his waist measured 54 inches. His legs were so ulcerated that servants had to carry him between rooms on a chair. He was 55 years old. The man who had executed wives and monasteries alike was being destroyed from the inside by what he ate. Henry is the extreme case, but he was not an isolated one. From roughly the 13th century onward, court diets in Northern Europe began shifting in a specific and dangerous direction. Meat more frequently. Organ meats, kidney, liver, brain, prized for richness and status. Sugar, newly available and extravagantly expensive, worked into sauces, desserts, and wine. Less physical labor as warfare became more administrative. More sitting, more eating, less moving. The result was predictable. Gout, caused by uric acid crystals accumulating in joints, driven by heavy consumption of red meat, organ meats, and alcohol, became so common among European elites that medieval physicians called it the disease of kings. It was not said as a warning, it was said as a compliment. Suffering from gout meant you could afford to eat in the way that caused it. This is where the comparison with Rome sharpens into something precise. A Roman senator's luxury risk was lead-sweetened wine, invisible, cumulative, metabolic. A Northern European king's luxury risk by the 15th century was gout, obesity, and joint destruction from meat and sugar eaten in quantities that bodies were not designed to process daily. A study of 871 European rulers found that Mediterranean kings consistently outlived their northern counterparts. The researchers pointed to diet as a likely contributor. Those rulers stayed closer to the Roman pattern: plant foods, olive oil, less of the feasting excess that was crippling courts further north. Some kings never stopped eating like Romans. They lived longer for it. Documents can be rewritten. Chronicles can be commissioned. Marble statues are always flattering. Bones are not. Bioarchaeology, the study of human remains to reconstruct lived experience, has produced some of the most uncomfortable findings in the Romans versus medieval debate, and most of them cut in unexpected directions. Start with medieval Cambridge. Researchers examined 314 skeletons across 3 burial sites: an ordinary parish graveyard, a charitable hospital, and an Augustinian friary. The results mapped inequality with clinical precision. 44% of ordinary workers showed healed bone fractures, evidence of physical trauma from years of heavy manual labor. Among friars and wealthy donors buried in the friary, the rate dropped to 32%. Among hospital inmates, 27%. The harder your life, the more it showed up in your skeleton. Medieval inequality was not just economic, it was written into the structure of the body. Now go back to Rome. Researchers studying over 50 archaeological sites across the Roman Empire found something that should not exist if Roman sanitation worked as advertised. Parasite levels, roundworm, whipworm, entamoeba, histolytica, fish tapeworm, showed no meaningful decline compared with Bronze Age, or later medieval populations. In some regions, they increased under Roman rule. The most likely explanation is the infrastructure itself. Multi-seat public latrines, where Romans sat shoulder to shoulder over shared channels, created ideal conditions for fecal-oral transmission. The same hands that used communal sponge sticks touched food. Baths that were not cleaned frequently enough circulated contaminants. The system designed to remove filth was simultaneously spreading it. Rome did build one genuinely effective medical structure, the valetudinarium. Military field hospitals, deployed with legions, with segregated wards, drainage, and organized triage, the first systematic military medical service in history. No medieval army came close to replicating it. It kept soldiers functional. It did not solve the parasites. Nobody, and that is the only honest answer. Rome built infrastructure no medieval state matched. Their default diet was accidentally excellent. Their military had organized hospitals. Their cultural emphasis on regimen, diet, bathing, exercise as daily practice was the closest thing the ancient world produced to preventive medicine. And Rome was riddled with intestinal parasites, chronically poisoning its own elites through their wine, and stunting children in its most advanced cities through the sheer density of urban infection. Early medieval kings were not the caricature. Isotopic data shows their daily diets looked broadly similar to their peasants. Cereal-based, modest in meat, periodically restricted by church fasting. The groaning feast table was theatre, not nutrition. Later, medieval and early modern kings, particularly in Northern Europe, were closer to the caricature than any Roman ever was. Sedentary, meat-heavy, sugar-dosed, gout-ridden. Their bodies accumulated the consequences of wealth in ways that a moderately active Roman eating bread, beans, and olive oil simply did not. So here is the sharpest version of the comparison that the evidence actually supports. A moderately active Roman citizen on a standard Mediterranean diet was probably in better metabolic shape than a sedentary 15th century Northern European king eating at a full court. That comparison holds. A Roman living in a crowded imperial city, drinking lead-sweetened wine and sharing a latrine with 40 strangers, versus a medieval peasant working outdoors in a low-density village. That comparison is far less clear. Different environments, different trade-offs, different ways of being slowly destroyed. Health has always been a class system dressed as a civilization. Rome had one version. Medieval Europe had another. Neither version was kind to the people at the bottom. Every civilization finds its own way to make luxury toxic. Rome's elites sweetened their wine with lead syrup and called it refinement. Medieval courts loaded their tables with meat, organ flesh, and sugar until their kings could not walk and called it power. The infrastructure changed. The aqueducts gave way to garderobes. The thermae gave way to the sponge bath in a private chamber. But the pattern underneath never did. The people with the most access to each era's best technology and food, the Roman senator, the Northern European king, also had the most access to each era's most specific method of self-destruction. And the people at the bottom of both systems got neither the benefits nor the glamorous diseases. They got the parasites, the fractures, the stunted bones, and the childhood infections that killed more of them than any plague or any war. That is the real answer to the question this video asked. Not who was healthier, but who the health was for. Rome built the machine. Medieval Europe inherited the ruins. Neither one built it for everyone. If that changes how you think about history, about who progress actually serves, subscribe. Every video on this channel exists to find the version of the past that does not make it into the textbooks. Do not miss what we cover next.